now.
Hello, and welcome to this Beyond Shakespeare exploring session. We have been looking at the Duchess of Malfi by John Webster, one of the more well-known texts that we've looked at. This is the third of, I think it's going to be four. It's a long text and one that really rewards discussion. So we have been taking our time with this. So here to keep exploring is this lovely room of Zoom readers, international team of talented people, and they will introduce themselves here. So reading the Duchess herself today.
Sarah Blake, actor, writer, and director, currently based in Germany.
And reading Bosola, and possibly the second Madman. We're not really sure.
Mark in the Midwest United States.
And reading Cariola.
Lois in London.
Or perhaps Cariola, we're not really sure. Reading fourth Madman, Servants. And I think that's it today.
Rachel in Canada.
Alrighty, and third Madman, first Executioner, I think that's going to be it today, is
Kyle in Tucson.
And first Madman and Ferdinand.
Well, I'm going slightly mad in Suffolk.
Alrighty, here we go. I'm done with that. Act 4, Scene 1, enter Ferdinand and Bosola.
How doth our sister Duchess bear herself in her imprisonment?
Nobly, I'll describe her. She's sad as one long used to it, and she seems rather to welcome the end of misery than shun it, a behavior so noble as gives a majesty to adversity. You may discern the shape of loveliness more perfect in her tears than in her smiles. She will muse for hours together, and her silence, methinks, expresseth more than if she spake.
Her melancholy seems to be fortified with a strange disdain.
'Tis so, and this restraint, like English mastiffs that grow fierce with tying, makes her too passionately apprehend those pleasures she is kept from.
Curse upon her! I will no longer study in the book of another's heart. Inform her what I told you.
Exit Ferdinand, enter Duchess and attendants.
All comfort to your grace.
I will have none. Pray thee, why dost thou wrap thy poisoned pills in gold and sugar?
Your elder brother, the Lord Ferdinand, is come to visit you, and sends you word, 'cause once he rashly made a solemn vow never to see you more, he comes in the night, and prays you gently neither torch nor taper shine in your chamber. He will kiss your hand and reconcile himself. Before his vow, he dares not see you.
At his pleasure. Take hence the lights. He's come.
Exit attendants with lights, enter Ferdinand.
Where are you?
Here, sir.
This darkness suits you well.
I would ask your pardon.
You have it, for I account it the honourablest revenge, where I may kill to pardon. Where are your cubs?
Whom?
Call them your children, although on national law distinguish bastards from true legitimate issue. Compassionate nature makes them all equal.
Do you visit me for this? You violate a sacrament of the church shall make you howl in hell for it.
It had been well could you have loved us always, for indeed you were too much in the light. But no more. I come to seal my peace with you. Here's a hand.
Gives her a dead man's hand.
To which you have vowed much love. The ring upon it you gave.
I affectionately kiss it.
Pray do, and bury the print of it in your heart. I will leave this ring with you for a love token, and the hand as sure as the ring. And do not doubt, but you shall have the heart too. When you need a friend, send it to him that owed it. You shall see whether he can aid you.
You are very cold. I fear you are not well after your travel. Ha! Lights! Horrible!
Let her have lights enough.
Exit Ferdinand.
What witchcraft doth he practice that he hath left a dead man's hand here?
Pause for just a bit because yeah, there's something coming up that so thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Rachel.
That last bit when the Duchess is, "You are very cold." I'm curious, is she addressing the dead hand or her brother?
She thinks she's holding Ferdinand's hand.
Yeah.
And then she realizes, well, when he says that, the hand as short as the ring. This is one of the things where you really have to think about the original staging, where even if it was done at Blackfriars, there would have been enough light for the audience to get some idea of what was going on here. I mean, that stage direction comes rather early, it gives her a dead man's hand, because I don't think you're meant to know then, because presumably he's holding it and then he moves away, as he says, and the hand sure as the ring. And because it's so dark, I think we're meant to think that she can't even tell that he's leaving at that point. And of course, he's still there to shout, "Let her have lights enough." But it's really quite creepy.
Susan, I forgot
so it's partway through that speech she realizes it's a dead hand.
Yeah.
Only when she realized she's not holding him, that he's not there anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And the ring, the bit about the ring is interesting, though. I think if you remember in the Dumb Show at Loretto, there's a bit about his taking the wedding ring off her hand. Well, the cardinal actually is the one who does it, I think, in the Loretto scene. But since he says this is the ring you gave, it's, I mean, I assume it's that ring, although it could be a ring that she actually gave him, that he's put onto the dead man's hand. I mean, it's not very clear what ring this is, actually.
Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, just thinking the slight, I think in staging, I would actually have Ferdinand make to exit and let her have lights enough as he's right on his way out the door.
Yeah.
Which really reinforces the point that he's jumping ship.
Yeah. Yes, we have a participant who is just commenting today. I thought you waved, Susan. No?
Hello. Yes. Hello.
Okay. Oh, okay. You didn't have a response for this. Yeah, super creepy. Ferdinand just gets creepier and creepier. I mean, in the first 3 acts, we discovered he's not a nice person, and seems a little obsessive about his sister in ways that are kind of, we would say, unhealthy these days. Oh, Kyle, were you waving?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you're saying, because I wondered about that ring too. I encountered this play before, I've read this play before, but I never thought about the ring as being actually something she might have given him. But in that moment, I thought maybe there was, and she doesn't say anything about it, which is weird because of that whole weird relationship they have.
And actually, I mean, until you see the next scene, you won't really know, but he actually intends her to think that it's that she knows where the hand comes from. It's particularly awful. When they did this at the Wanamaker, because they actually could get the place completely the dark, they actually closed off all sources of light, and we were just sitting there in the dark for this. But I think this is actually wrong. I mean, I think you are meant to get some sense, as you think at first that Ferdinand is giving her his hand, and then as he pulls away and she's still holding a hand, then you realize what's going on.
Yeah, that would be the creepiest way to do it, is to fake out the audience as well. That would, yeah. Okay, so the stage direction that comes next, where I stopped us, reads, "Here is discovered behind a traverse the artificial figures of Antonio and his children, appearing as if they were dead."
Look you, here is the piece from which 'twas ta'en. He doth present you this sad spectacle, that, now you know directly they are dead, hereafter you may wisely cease to grieve for that which cannot be recovered.
There is not between heaven and earth one wish I stay for after this. It wastes me more than wert my picture, fashioned out of wax, stuck with a magical needle, and then buried in some foul dunghill. And yon's an excellent property for a tyrant, which I would account mercy.
What's that?
if they would bind me to that lifeless trunk and let me freeze to death.
Come, you must live.
That's the greatest torture souls feel in hell. In hell that they must live and cannot die. Portia, I'll new kindle thy coals again and revive the rare and almost dead example of a loving wife.
Ah, fie, despair? Remember, you are a Christian.
The church enjoins fasting. I'll starve myself to death.
Leave this vain sorrow. Things being at the worst, begin to mend. The bee, when he hath shot his sting into your hand, may then play with your eyelid.
Good, comfortable fellow, persuade a wretch that's broke upon the wheel to have all his bones new set? Entreat him live to be executed again? Who must dispatch me? I account this world a tedious theatre, for I do play a part in it 'gainst my will.
Come, be of comfort. I will save your life.
Indeed, I have not leisure to tend so small a business.
Now, by my life, I pity you.
Thou art a fool, then, to waste thy pity on a thing so wretched as cannot pity itself. I am full of daggers. Puff, let me blow these vipers from me.
Enter a servant.
What are you?
One that wishes you a long life.
I would thou wert hanged for this horrible curse thou hast given me. I shall shortly grow one of the miracles of pity. I'll go pray.
Exit servant.
No, I'll go curse.
Ah, fie.
I could curse the stars.
Fearful.
And those 3 smiling seasons of the year into a Russian winter. Nay, the world to its first chaos.
Look you, the stars shine still.
Oh, but you must remember my curse hath a great way to go. Plagues that make lanes through largest families consume them.
Fie, lady.
Let them like tyrants never be remembered but for the ill they have done. Let all the zealous prayers of mortified churchmen forget them.
Uncharitable.
Let heaven a little while cease crowning martyrs to punish them. Go, howl them this, and say I long to bleed. It is some mercy when men kill with speed.
Exit Duchess. Enter Ferdinand.
Excellent, I would wish. She's played in art. These presentations are but framed in wax by the curious master in that quality, Vincento Loriola. She takes them for true, substantial bodies.
Why do you do this?
To bring her to despair.
Faith, end here, and go no farther in your cruelty. Send her a penitential garment to put on next to her delicate skin, and furnish her with beads and prayer books.
Damn her! Body of hers, while my blood run purient, was more worth than that which thou wouldst comfort called a soul. I will send her mask to common courtesans, have her meat served up by bawds and ruffians. Because she'll needs be mad, I am resolved to move forth the common hospital, all the mad folk, and place them near her lodging. There, let them practice together, sing and dance, and act their gambols to the full of the moon. If she can sleep the better for it, let her. Your work is almost ended.
Must I see her again?
Yes.
Never.
You must.
Never in mine own shape that's forfeited by my intelligence in this last cruel lie. When you send me next, the business shall be comfort.
Very likely. My pity is nothing akin to thee. Antonio lurks about Milan. Thou shalt shortly thither, to feed a fire as great as my revenge, which ne'er will slack till it has spent his fuel. Intemperate agues make physicians cruel.
And they exit. End of scene. Okay. Thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay, Lois.
Well, again, I think putting that stage direction there, it's that was a Webster direction, and it's presumably for the benefit of the people putting the play on, but it's not very good for the reader, because I'm sure you're not meant to know that these are wax figures until Ferdinand says so.
Yeah. Yeah. As if in wax, but since it's a stage effect, and it might actually be the actors in production. Alan.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I don't think we've come across wax maquettes used in that way in other plays, unless I'm misremembering.
Yeah, I don't.
Do you remember any others, Lois?
No. No,
Dumb shows.
yeah, we've had people characters who looked as if they were dead, who presumably were just played by the actors, but then they usually get up and turn out not to be dead.
Yeah.
I often think about those figures, in Italy when they parade through the streets, wax Madonnas, and these are not things that people haven't seen before, but maybe not turned on its head in this way.
I did not know there was sort of a religious echo there.
There is, isn't there? I mean, it's a sort of Madonna and Child thing with the wax figures.
During Holy Week,
some way.
During Holy Week in Spain, especially, huge life-sized ones, very beautifully dressed. Yeah. Also, I mean,
glass tears.
If you go to the Wallace collection in London, you can see some small wax figures, which are very realistic. Apparently, there were at one time quite a lot of portraits in wax, and because it's so malleable and they could color it and give it a kind of consistency like flesh, they were sort of semi-sculpted, kind of, I think, low relief. So this would have been a bit more familiar. I don't know if there was such a person. Nobody seems to have found any reference to this Vincenzo Lariola. It's really curious the way Webster likes to stick in proper names like that.
That's a weird effect that he names an artist, and evidently a fictional artist, as near as we can tell. That's just weird. That's just.
Yeah, it really reminds me of Browning's poem, My Last Duchess, where the speaker of that, who is really rather like Ferdinand, in fact, keeps talking about this artist and that artist, and real connoisseur when he's talking about something quite horrible that he's done. And it's a bit like that here. Oh yes, these are really rather fine wax figures by Vincenzo Lariola. Yes, I'm rather proud of them. Just after he tried to drive his sister mad.
Yeah. Well, mad, yes, but I kind of want to focus on the line to bring her to despair. That's actually a very, very serious that the stakes there are higher than I think a modern audience will realize. Despair is the greatest sin of all, giving up on God. That's why suicide is so taboo in Christian cultures, is because you're basically giving up on God's love for you. So in that line, he's not just saying, I want to make her miserable, I want to torture her, I want to drive her insane. I want her to despair so that when I kill her, she goes to hell.
Yeah, because right after that, he does say, damn her, and I think he means it literally. Yeah.
Can I just ask whether anybody else's plague seems to come into this a lot? I thought that line about driving a lane through a family, of people dying during a plague, plagues that make lanes through largest families. I mean, considering what we've all just been through, it's quite this has got a new layer now for me. That's just, I know this scene well, and I hadn't noticed how often plague comes into this, as well as madness, as well as the wax, and it's quite a bombardment, isn't it?
There'd been quite a lot of plagues in London. In fact, I mean, I think someone's noted the theaters were closed longer than they were open during the early years of James's reign. I think lots of people came to London for his coronation, and then, of course, whenever there were a lot of people coming from abroad, it brought even more of it in. And there seemed to have been lots and lots of plague closures. And that's the point of The Alchemist, which I think is 1610, that it refers to plague and everything being closed down.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, what I get from the plague references is, I think it's in the same sort of metaphorical arena as all the references to bodily vermin. Plague is not just deadly; it's disfiguring. these black infectious buboes appear on the skin. So it's actually appalling, not just to suffer it, but to watch it. So I mean, it's just so I think there's this sort of thread of he just wants to gross the audience out. Talking about ferment, talking about disease, the severed hand. The hand's not wax. It says in the stage directions, I don't know if that's original, but the hand is a dead person's hand. So it's just these grand guignol effects that that the play keeps coming back to. It's part of that sort of this like revolting atmosphere that Webster's cultivating here. Plague, vermin, not just death, but like everything that sort of appalls and revolts us.
And then in the middle of it is her fabulous body, which suddenly comes up in the middle of it all. She's obviously beautiful in amongst all this bile.
Yes, and that's a really interesting line, that body of hers, while my blood ran pure in it. So that's a really narcissistic thing to say, I think. So you get the sense that he's so obsessed with his sister, with what she does with her body, with what she does with her affections, because he sees her as an extension of himself.
The cardinal's already spoken of our blood, the royal blood of Aragon and Castile.
Yeah. But as I remember, though, he was talking more about him and Ferdinand. She wasn't really included in that. It's like our family.
But it's because she's tainting it by her by mixing it with somebody else. I mean, by her lust, as they think it is at that point. I mean, that's quite a lot earlier. What interests me, well, a lot of things that interest me in the scene, but what sort of role is Bosola playing? I mean, he seems to be trying to calm her down and comfort her, but then he's also, I think he's in disguise. I don't think she even is quite sure who he is, because he's taken on so many roles during this. I mean, he was wearing a visor when he arrested her at the end of the previous scene. There's that bit where he says, "Look you, the stars shine still," after she's cursed them, which is a really chilling line too.
Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I said yesterday or in the previous recording, that I'm still trying to get a handle on who the heck Bosola is, because he does seem to present different faces to different people. And trying to find a through line, I think, would be incredibly difficult for an actor to do that isn't just jarring on it, because on occasion he's sympathetic to the Duchess, he's sympathetic to Antonio, but he's also very much in Ferdinand's pocket as far as doing what he's told. And the guy could be played as being immensely conflicted by that, I think.
Yeah. Is he just faking it, or is he actually torn apart inside? That's a question an actor.
Yeah.
It's a question an actor is going to have to. Mark, you're back in the room at just the right time. So we were just talking about Bosola, and his interaction with the Duchess. Is he genuinely sympathetic, or is he faking it and trying to extend her life so that so Ferdinand can torture her some more? What's your take on Bosola in this scene?
I don't see a reason why he would be chatting with Ferdinand the way he is, talking about how he doesn't want to have to continue in any part of this whole thing. Asks why he's doing this. So, when Ferdinand's like, yes, you still have to do more with her, he says, never, I will not see her again. I think based on those lines, I think it has to be played that he is truly sympathetic to her at this point. I mean, I think the idea is that, seeing just how torn apart she is Making his little Grinch heart grow 3 sizes.
A little late for that. Yeah. This is one of the reasons that I love this part, and I imagine it's why one of the reasons Lois loves this part is it's so complex. That you really don't know where to have him. He is all over the place. He can be really cynical and really cruel, and but here he's genuine. He seems genuinely moved. Like, why are you doing this? Like, no, I don't want to take part in this anymore. So he definitely has his limits. And the way he talks about the Duchess in the beginning of this scene, we talked in the previous session, I think, about how you might play Bosola as kind of in love with the Duchess as well, which, is part of that building a kind of counterpart relationship between him and Antonio. So, and the way he talks about her is so lovely and so lyrical about how noble she is. At the beginning of this scene, Susan.
I think the physical thing of the actor playing him is really important. There was a speech in the previous recording about these basically bits of rough. There was a really violent speech about talking about maybe the Duchess having, being sort of in some kind of gangbang kind of thing with ruffians, with do you know that bit, Lois? Do you remember there's a anyway, I think that Bosola, because he has to be so different to the other men, the other leading men here, I think he's sort of a man who's been on a ship, or he's been, he's surprised by his feelings. He's not somebody who comes from an enlightened world. He's a working man, and so his falling in love is different.
Well,
does that make sense?
He's got all sorts of background. I mean, he's described at one point as having been at university, but he also says at the beginning of the play that he's been in the galleys. That is, he's
there we are. Yeah,
been a prisoner and working on a galley ship. I mean, in some ways, he's kind of the classic plot of an awful lot of television series. Actually, the guy who gets out of jail wants to go straight and keeps being dragged back into criminal gangs that he used to know. I'm surprised they don't do this play more often in a way, because that particular story is very familiar. But he does at the beginning say he has no idea why Ferdinand's doing this, and he keeps trying to get him to think about it. And he says, if you're really trying to punish her or if you think she's being sinful and lustful, then send her prayer books. Don't treat her like this. And he says, when you send me next, the business shall be comfort. And very importantly, he says if he's got to see her again, it will not be in mine own shape. So he will be in yet another disguise. But Ferdinand does have that odd line, thy pity is nothing of kin to thee, which is an odd way of putting it. You feel pity for her, but it's not really related to you, or he seems to be.
That's not the kind of feeling you're supposed to feel.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think Alan and then Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of established in some ways that Bosola and Antonio are probably a similar social level. In other words, not aristocracy, but probably landed gentry in those terms, or sons of landed gentry. I must admit, the bit that Lois has just referred to about the academic side of it, that is just that one speech. And I have a funny feeling that speech, which was Dorio, I think, talking just after Bosola entered, I think he was actually describing Maltesta, because that seemed to fit with the character of Maltesta, as had been mentioned in the preceding few lines, of the dilettante who'd spent hours comparing statues or whatever. I'm not entirely sure that speech isn't misleading. Then word structure make it look as if it might apply to Bosola.
Yeah, it's weird for Bosola. Yeah, I don't know. I tend to agree that there might be a transmission problem there. Mark's been waiting for a bit, but I want to go back to Lois after that. How's that?
Yeah, and I was going to say, Lois mentioned thy pity. I think it was Lois who mentioned thy pity is nothing of kin to thee. And to me, that reads like Ferdinand saying, so it's right after Bosola said, when you send me next, the business shall be comfort. And Ferdinand says, very likely, thy pity is nothing of kin to thee. I read that as Ferdinand saying, well, it's very likely the business I'm going to have you do is going to be comfort, because that pity is out of character for you. It's probably going to be short-lived. You love being a jerk and doing terrible things, so you will take comfort in the schemes that I have for you next. I don't know what I was going to say otherwise, but yeah, it's a good scene, good character.
Yeah.
It's out of character for you. I think that's what that means. Lois.
Yeah, I think, well, the business shall be comfort. I took it to mean, when you send me next, let me comfort her instead of torturing her like this.
Right.
But yeah, the stuff about his having been a scholar, I mean, he is described as a malcontent at one point, and the malcontent figure we've come across before, and they usually are scholars. Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy has a chapter about the miseries of scholars, or why the muses are melancholy, and it's really the same sort of idea we get nowadays of the unemployed graduate student, essentially, being too intellectual and not given any sort of job.
Yeah. Rachel.
Yeah, just thinking about the I read the Bosola line, when you send me next, the business shall be comfort, the same way Lois does, that he wants to comfort the Duchess, because he's having increasing qualms about the role he's playing. But I think the next line is the one that's tripping up Mark, perhaps, and very likely, I think, has a sense of not bloody likely, because I think that there's a sense that Ferdinand saying, yeah, you want to comfort her, that's not your character. I think that's the sense of it, not actual the literal meaning.
Yeah, sarcasm. Would Ferdinand be sarcastic? I just don't know.
Sure, very likely. Oh, sure, I'll comfort her. Yeah, I think that's quite possible. Yes.
Yeah. Mark, again.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that Bosola means it as I will comfort her, or something else positive. And what I was saying is that Ferdinand is the response of very likely could be him turning that like, oh, it will be a comfort because you're a bad person, you're just having a moment of weakness, so you will take comfort in this. But yes, definitely Bosola is meaning it in a yeah, I wasn't sure when I first read it whether he was saying, when you send me next to the Duchess, I will be comforting her, or the next thing you make me do better be something business of comfort.
Not
like,
awful.
come on, don't make me do something awful. Like, let me do something nice for once, somewhere. It doesn't have to be here. Send me to another country. Have me do something nice for someone.
Yeah, I think, Lois has a good point that you could, as an actor and a director, a production could sort of integrate that backstory of having been a scholar with the person he turned out to be. And I think that adds a sort of layer of pathos because, he's intelligent. He thinks about higher things. He thinks about abstract things. He had potential to have this sort of intellectual life, but he's been reduced to killing people for a living, because his first love, the intellectual life, wasn't remunerative at all. So I mean, yeah, I think you could work that in, but on the surface of it, yeah, that description of him as an effete scholar doesn't really seem to be consistent. And going back in the conversation a little, I really liked what Susan said about he doesn't know, these are unfamiliar emotions. He doesn't know what to make of feeling tenderness. So, and again, you could integrate that with the scholar. It's like everything is abstract when you're a scholar. Nothing has any real life implications. Life of the mind, not of the heart. So he's unfamiliar with feeling tenderness towards another human being. So Lois, and then back to Susan.
Yeah, in a way, it's a pity that we're doing this before rather than after Webster's other play, which is chronologically earlier. I mean, his other great tragedy, The White Devil, because that really anticipates a lot of this. I mean, there is a character in that who definitely has been at university and says so, and couldn't make any money and is now doing some other rather sleazy way, and who also says at one point, and that is really sort of like what you were talking about with feelings, I have a strange thing in me, to the which I know not how to give a name, without it be compassion. In other words, this guy also just can't figure out what he's feeling, but it must be pity, you know. And he's another one who's led a really awful life.
Yeah. So yes, Susan, you were.
I was just thinking it would be really fun to do the animals of these characters. If I was directing this, I'd want, we already know Ferdinand is a fox. Something about Bosola. For me, it's like Beauty and the Beast or something. I want him to be a bear or something like that, who finds himself through this story. But anyway, they were very interested in the animals and their, and how they equated to different personalities, weren't they? Am I right, Lois? I always think
yeah. You think of Balpone, but also
exactly.
Actually, in the next act, you'll see something about the animal stuff. Yeah.
The only animals we've really had so far, one reference to wolves and then body vermin. But I don't remember this well enough to talk about other animals, but we'll get there. Okay. So if we've tapped that more or less for now, we will move on to Act 4, Scene 2. Enter Duchess and Cariola, or Cariola.
What hideous noise was that?
'Tis the wild consort of Madman, lady, which your tyrant brother hath placed about your lodging. This tyranny, I think, was never practised till this hour.
Indeed, I thank him. Nothing but noise and folly can keep me in my right wits, whereas reason and silence make me stark mad. Sit down. Discourse to me some dismal tragedy.
'Twill increase your melancholy.
Thou art deceived. To hear of greater grief would lessen mine. This is a prison.
Yes, but you shall live to shake this durance off.
Thou art a fool. The robin redbreast and the nightingale never live long in cages.
Pray dry your eyes. What think you of, madam?
Of nothing. When I muse thus, I sleep.
Like a madman with your eyes open?
Dost thou think we shall know one another in the other world?
Yes, out of question.
Oh, that it were possible we might but hold some 2 days' conference with the dead. From them I should learn somewhat, I am sure, I never shall know here. I'll tell thee a miracle. I am not mad yet, to my cause of sorrow. The heaven over my head seems made of molten brass, the earth of flaming sulphur, yet I am not mad. I am acquainted with sad misery as the tanned galley slave is with his oar. Necessity makes me suffer constantly, and custom makes it easy. Who do I look like now?
Like to your picture in the gallery. A deal of life in show, but none in practice. Or rather, like some reverend monument whose ruins are even pitied.
Very proper. And fortune seems only to have her eyesight to behold my tragedy. How now? What noise is that?
Enter servant.
I am come to tell you, your brother hath intended you some sport. A great physician, when the Pope was sick of a deep melancholy, presented him with several sorts of madmen, which wild object, being full of change and sport, forced him to laugh. And so the imposthume broke. The selfsame cure the Duke intends on you.
Let them come in.
There's a mad lawyer and a secular priest, a doctor that hath forfeited his wits by jealousy, an astrologian that in his work said such a day of the month should be the day of doom, and failing of it, ran mad. An English tailor who crazed in the brain with the study of new fashions. A gentleman usher quite beside himself with care to keep in mind the number of his lady's salutations, or how you do she employed him in each morning. A farmer, too, an excellent knave in grain, mad because he was hindered to transportation. And let one broker that's mad loose to these. You'd think the devil were among them,
said Cariola. Let them loose when you please, for I am chained to endure all your tyranny.
Enter Madman. Here, by a madman, this song is sung to a dismal kind of music.
Oh, let us howl some heavy note, some deadly dogged howl, sounding as from the threatening throat of beasts and fatal fowl. As ravens screech owls, bulls and bears, will bell and bawl our parts, till irksome noise have cloyed your ears, in chorus hived your hearts. At last, when as our choir wants breath, our bodies being blessed, we'll sing like swans to welcome death, and die in love and rest.
Doomsday's not come yet. A trick nearer by perspective, or make a glass that shall set all the world on fire in an instant. I cannot sleep. My lip pillow is stuffed with a litter of porcupines.
Hell is a mere glass house, where the devils are continually blowing up women's souls on hollow irons, and the fire never goes out.
I will lie with every woman in my parish the 10th night. I will tide them over like haycocks.
Shall my apothecary outgo me because I am a cuckold? I have found out his roguery. He makes alum out of his wife's urine and sells it to Puritans that have sore throats with overstraining.
I have skill in heraldry.
Past?
You do give your crest a woodcock's head with the brains picked out on it. You're a very ancient gentleman.
Greek is turned Turk. We are only to be saved by the Helvetian translation.
Come on, sir. I will lay the law to you.
Rather a lay a corrosive. The law will eat to the bone.
He that drinks but to satisfy nature is damned.
If I had my glass here, I would show a sight. Should make all the women here call me a mad doctor.
What's he? A rope maker?
No, a snuffling knave that, while he shows the tombs, will have his hand in a wench's placket.
Woe to the cucaracha that brought home my wife from the mass at 3 o'clock in the morning. It had a large feather bed in it.
I have pared the devil's nails 40 times, roasted them in raven's eggs, and cured agues with them.
Get me 300 milch bats to make possets to procure sleep.
All the college may throw their caps at me. I have made a soap boiler costume. It was my masterpiece.
Here the dance, consisting of 8 madmen, with music answerable thereunto, after which Bosola, like an old man, enters.
Is he mad too?
Pray, question him. I'll leave you.
Exeunt servant and madman.
I am come to make thy tomb.
My tomb? Thou speak'st as if I lay upon my deathbed, gasping for breath. Dost thou perceive me sick?
Yes, and the more dangerously, since thy sickness is insensible.
Thou art not mad, sure? Dost know me?
Yes.
Who am I?
Thou art a box of worm seed, at best but a salvatory of green mummy. What's this flesh? A little cruded milk, fantastical puff paste? Our bodies are weaker than those paper prisons boys used to keep flies in, more contemptible since ours is to preserve earthworms. Didst thou ever see a lark in a cage, such as the soul in the body? This world is like her little turf of grass, and the heaven o'er our heads like her looking-glass, only gives us a miserable knowledge of the small compass of our prison.
Am not I thy Duchess?
Thou art some great woman, sure, for riot begins to sit on thy forehead, clad in grey hairs, 20 years sooner than on a merry milkmaid's. Thou sleepest worse than if a mouse should be forced to take up her lodging in a cat's ear. A little infant that breeds its teeth, should it lie with thee, would cry out as if thou wert the more unquiet bedfellow.
I am Duchess of Malfi still.
That makes thy sleep so broken. Glories like glowworms afar off shine bright, but looked to near have neither heat nor light.
Thou art very plain.
My trade is to flatter the dead, not the living. I'm a tomb maker.
And thou comest to make my tomb?
Yes.
Let me be a little merry. Of what stuff wilt thou make it?
Nay, resolve me first, of what fashion?
Why? Do we grow fantastical on our deathbed? Do we affect fashion in the grave?
Most ambitiously. Princes' images on their tombs do not lie as they were wont, seeming to pray up to heaven, but with their hands under their cheeks, as if they died of the toothache. They are not carved with their eyes fixed upon the stars, but as their minds were wholly bent upon the world, the selfsame way they seem to turn their faces.
Let me know fully, therefore, the effect of this thy dismal preparation, this talk fit for a charnel.
Now I shall.
Enter executioners with a coffin, cords, and a bell. And let's pause. And this doesn't really feel like a natural break, but in hindsight, I think I should have taken a little break after the Madman leaves, so we can talk about that scene. Yeah, Alan, get us started.
Yeah, I mean, I can see to a certain extent the point of doing it, but I do just wonder whether this was just put in as a bit of a spectacle to break things up a bit. Because you've got 8 characters, and I think or 8 characters in total, 4 of whom speak. I think it's the only time they actually appear in the play. And you've got this sort of strange sort of Dadaist dialogue going on, which I'm sure could be highly entertaining on stage.
Yeah, if you're into that kind of thing. Lois, did you wave?
Sorry, my screen is jumping all over the place. It must have been very much part of the thing, because the actually music for this does survive. Robert Johnson, who is the kind of in-house composer, did actually do the music for that song, and you can get it on some CDs. I don't know. I mean, I think madness is so obviously a topic here. I mean, at the end of the scene where the Duchess courts Antonio, Cariola says that it shows a fearful madness. And Antonio's already said, ambition is a great man's madness. And there's that. And then Ferdinand, when he gets a letter telling him that his sister has had a child, says that he's gone mad because he's digged up a mandrake. I mean, there is a sense of madness running through the play. And these madmen are very much like some of the other stuff, like all that talk about the Switzer, like some of the chit chat of the courtiers. There are these odd bits. You can, say light relief, comic relief, but there seems to be something else, I think, going on here.
The thematic thing. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I don't see this as light relief at all, I have to say. I mean, maybe I'm looking at it through contemporary eyes, maybe audiences would have felt differently about it at the time. But when you see a genuinely mad person, when you see someone who is genuinely, mentally disturbed to the point where they make no sense to us who are lucky enough to more or less have our wits about us still. I mean, they don't tend to be very happy people. They tend to be either very, very angry or extremely distressed, or sometimes both. And I think if you actually played these characters as genuinely mad, not kind of, like ditties, blah, 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 but if you actually played them, if you've ever walked past a like a homeless person on the street who's obviously in mental distress, I mean, it's a horrible thing. And to be surrounded by people like that, to be in prison and to be kind of suddenly overwhelmed with a whole group of people like that. It's going to be incredibly distressing. It's gonna kind of cause a lot of anxiety. It's going to cause a lot of compassion, but it's also going to cause a lot of fear, because that's the other thing about true mental distress. You quite often never know how people are going to react. Well, at least I wouldn't. Perhaps a professional would, but like there's this thing of like physical danger as well. And I think this could actually, I don't know if that's what Webster had in mind, but certainly I think this scene has the capacity to be truly like distressing and horrifying. The fact that Ferdinand is using these poor people to terrorize his sister, and to kind of either drive her out of her wits herself, or just to torture her, really, just to kind of cause her mental anguish by surrounding her with people who are mentally anguished themselves. I think this is really quite has the capacity to be really horrific, and I don't know if that's what they did with it, obviously, but I think that's probably what you would do with it with a modern day production, because it's, if you do that, like what Lois was talking about, people talk about madness all the time. It's like, oh, she's crazy. Oh, he's madly in love with her, blah, blah, blah. Madness is a term that gets bandied about. And in the context of this play, Lynn was talking yesterday about the claustrophobia of it, and talk of madness in context of that sort of like tight and narrowing and darkening world that's coming in closer and closer and getting more and more claustrophobic. It does kind of add to this kind of slight feeling of hysteria, and I think this is kind of the climax of it. It could be, anyway. This her world has literally shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk to the size of a cell, or a room, at least, where she's confined. And now the space is becoming even smaller because it's being filled with all sorts of people who shouldn't be there. I think that's how I would look at this, and it's for me, that's what I see on the page. I don't see it as a spectacle at all.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I've been thinking about the institutional residence in the Changeling. Now, we've done the Changeling, right? So we can talk about it. Is that right?
I wasn't there for it. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, this Dance of Madmen is not unique in the surviving drama. I think it functions. I feel like it functions really differently here. Maybe it was supposed to be just sort of grotesquely funny at the time. So we have that sort of queasy seesawing of mood. But our 20th and 21st century views of mental illness and mental incapacitation are so different from what they were around 1600. I mean, in the Changeling, they don't really differentiate between schizophrenia and developmental delay. It's all the same to them, and we see mental disorders we have that parsed much more finely. We differentiate between anxiety and depression and schizophrenia, and which is a completely different category of difficulty than developmental delay, and some things can be treated and some things can't. So we see it so differently. It's really kind of hard to recapture, just because our way of being in the world in relation to mental non-normativeness is so different. But this scene really strikes me as so contemporary. So much of our time than their time. It just feels that way. I mean, these people are all obviously delusional or hallucinating, so they're all probably schizophrenic. Schizophrenia is not, as it turns out, a rare mental disorder. It afflicts, I've read, as much as 1 person in 100, which is actually, medically speaking, not rare at all. So yeah, and it's just like, I don't think a modern audience could help but feel really uncomfortable and really distressed. We'll do Sarah and then Lois in that order. Oh, you're muted, Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, the other thing is madness covers a whole, madness at this period covers a whole catch-all. It's a catch-all term that covers a whole host of, different things. But I mean, the other thing that these people could be, or at least some of them could be, are people suffering from dementia. And, if you've ever encountered a dementia patient, they can be really scary. They can be, bless them, they can be really frightening, because if they get a fixed idea in their heads, and they can be quite physical, there's that form of madness as well. And I think, yeah, I'm with you, Lynn. I think this actually, it probably was considered to be very, thought of in a very different way at the time, but I think this is aged really, really well. And I think in terms of this being a mental torture that's being inflicted on the Duchess by her brother, I think it can work really well, in a very, very horrifying and distressing way. Yeah.
Lois?
Couple of things. I mean, one is Mark asked in the chat, which of the four madmen is which, because the servant does give a list of different types. And that's one of the things that various editors have tried to sort out, and it's clear that one of them is a Puritan. I mean, the one that says her Greek is turned Turk, we are only to be saved by the Helvetian translation, because that's a reference to the Geneva Bible, which Puritans preferred to the, by this time there was what's called the Authorized or King James Version, which had just come out. And some of those were going back to the Greek and the Hebrew and so on. Anyway, the other thing is that it opens with the Duchess asking, what wild noise is this? And it's clear that, before it even starts, we're meant to be hearing something pretty scary. I mean, people screaming and yelling and all talking at once. And then when they come on the other hand, quite a lot of what they say, I think, is funny in a kind of awful way. I mean, because it makes so little sense. I mean, that idea of a carriage bringing somebody's wife home with a big feather bed in it. This is clearly someone who's afraid of being cuckolded and who imagines his wife having an affair in the back of the coach and this enormous feather bed. I mean, a lot of it is really kind of like Hieronymus Bosch or something, weird images. And I think it could be done either way. I mean, I think usually in most performances I've seen, you can't hear most of what they say anyway, because they're just sort of screaming and yelling. But if you could hear it, I think the thing would be just to deliver it in some ways really quite a flat way, since they don't think they're mad. They think they're talking perfect sense. And, just make sure people can get all this sense of, the whole world collapsing into complete nonsense really around the Duchess.
Yeah, the Bosch analogy is great. I think, a Bosch painting is what this play is. But I also really liked Ellen's characterizing it as Dada-esque. It's like, it's just chatter, and it really doesn't make any it's sort of nonsense sense, and they might all be doing this at once, or they might be overlapping, but like the way we read it, is that's not how it would. We wouldn't let everybody take a turn. I think it's more of a confused noise, or the lines overlap each other a little bit, so that it has that Dada-esque quality. Kyle, you were waving.
Yeah, I was just thinking of what Lois was saying with regard to the content of the speeches. It also seems to me that it reflects on the madness of Ferdinand and his obsession with his sister, the sexual jealousy. That seems to be an interesting kind of complication of this, of the Madman speech, if you can hear it.
Yeah, we definitely have a cuckold in there, and the servant's little catalog of which different kinds of men, really weird, and it's creepy in itself. It's so businesslike. It's so matter of fact. There's this guy and this guy. It's like a shopping list. And these people are crazy. They're insane. They're suffering, and like little shopping list. Yikes! Lois, did you have something to add to that?
Well, just that some of the masks of the period do involve madmen, and they usually are individually characterized in very much this way. And this is a kind of anti-mask, really, the kind of thing that you would get in a mask before the sort of serious and stately mask came in. So that, in a way that this is ceremonial. And apparently the sort of madman's dance was a recognized genre. The question is, I guess, how you do it. I mean, it could be both funny and entertaining, and at the same time really scary, especially if they get closer and closer to the Duchess and she's completely surrounded by them, and finally somebody has to drag them off.
Yeah. I kind of can't help thinking that what and I'm doing something I really disapprove of right now is sort of biographical criticism, that what Webster was hoping for is that initially the audience would laugh. Like Alan says, it's supposed to be sort of grotesquely comic, but then they sort of stop and go, "What am I laughing at?" And they a moment of self-reflection at their own sort of sadism. I think that would be the ideal reaction, I think. And then after that, Bosola comes back disguised as an old man, saying, "I'm a tomb maker, and I've come to make your tomb." And of course, people are concerned with what they look like after death. Yeah, so I kind of wish I'd stopped earlier so that we could like get our heads around this exchange too, because it's also really interesting, and I can't help noticing that Bosola, in his character as the old man, reverts mostly to prose in this exchange rather than verse. Yeah, Lois.
Yeah, I just again, you're going to get some lines later that kind of explain what he's doing. I think it's particularly the word mortification, which doesn't mean then what it means now. It means preparing for death, and that's really what he's doing here, I think. But it's not even clear until he explains it. I think, yeah, it's actually a very haunting scene, obviously, and the appearance of the executioners, the whole thing. That bit about princes' images on their tombs. If you've seen any tombs, he's talking quite right. I mean, the medieval tombs do tend to have people just lying face up, and then there are a lot of later 16th century ones where everybody is like this on their tomb, and his idea that they look as if they died of the toothache. I mean, some of this is funny. This is the thing about Webster. You can't really decide to just play this all in, to make it as tragic and horrible as possible. There's something else going on at the same time.
And again, with the flies and the worms and the a little curdled milk. I assume that's curdled milk, so like rot and and things spoiling and going bad.
Green mummy. We're not mummy yet, but we will be. It's a great idea. Like green apples. And but the image also of the bird. Birds in cages. We've had that before. The Duchess wishing that she and Antonio could be like the birds in the fields, that can carol their sweet pleasures to the spring. And here it's the idea of the soul in the body being like a lark in a cage, which is a common enough image if you look at emblems, the kind of symbolic pictures that went with verses explaining them.
Yeah, but wild birds die in captivity.
Yeah.
I mean, the image of a little pet bird also occurs in early modern poetry and early modern drama, but it's usually more romantic and more sweet, and here it's
well, she's already said, the robin redbreast and the nightingale never live long in cages.
The nightingale is kind of an obvious choice, but the robin redbreast, the herald of the spring, that's interesting. And the robin and the nightingale are an interesting contrast. One that's associated with the spring and renewal, and one that's associated with night and morning. And the sort of truism that Bosola goes on about thou art some great women for riot sits and I for a clad in gray hairs 20 years sooner than a milkmaid's. The whole idea of people in power lead miserable lives is really cliche in this period. The sword of Damocles. But this is kind of one of the more powerful ways of talking about it, that it always seems a little disingenuous to me. Oh, I have it so hard because I'm a king. It's not the person in power that's talking now. It's a person out of power saying, yeah, your state is really not that great. The worry, the anxiety, the stress age you. And looked up close, you're just a worm. That's such a great metaphor. Glories, like glowworms, afar off shine bright, but look to near, have neither heat nor light. You're like a little glowworm. You look pretty at a distance, but we get up close to you, you're an insect.
Yeah, he obviously
yeah.
liked that couplet because he also used it in The White Devil.
Oh, that same exact glories like glowworms.
Yeah.
It's just like he quotes himself. Oscar Wilde action going on there. Who also reuses his best lines. So yeah, Bosola back doing what he said he wouldn't do, tormenting her.
Well, no,
I guess, or is he trying to basically
you're going
say
to find out.
death is a relief? That yeah. So in the middle of Bosola's line, alert mark, enter executioners with a coffin, cords, ropes, and a bell.
Here is a present from your princely brothers, and may it arrive welcome, for it brings last benefit, last sorrow.
Let me see it. I have so much obedience in my blood, I wish it in their veins to do them good.
This is your last presence chamber.
Oh, my sweet lady.
Peace. It affrights not me.
I am the common bellman that usually is sent to condemned prisons the night before they suffer.
Even now thou saidst thou wast a tomb maker.
'Twas to bring you by degrees to mortification. Listen. Hark now. Everything is still. The screech owl and the whistler shrill call upon our dame aloud and bid her quickly don her shroud. Much you had of land and rent, your length in clays, now competent. A long war disturbed your mind. Here your perfect peace is signed. Of what is fools make such vain keeping? Sin their conception, their birth weeping, their life a general mist of error, their death a hideous storm of terror. Strew your hair with powder sweet, don clean linen, bathe your feet, and, the foul fiend more to check, crucifix let bless your neck. 'Tis now full tide 'tween night and day. End your groan and come away.
Hence, villains, tyrants, murderers! Alas, what will you do with my lady? Call for help.
To whom? To our next neighbours. They are mad folks.
Remove that noise.
Farewell, Cariola. In my last will I have not much to give, and many hungry guests have fed upon me. Thine will be a poor aversion.
I will die with her.
I pray thee, look, thou givest my little boy some syrup for his cold, and let the girl say her prayers ere she sleep.
Cariola is forced out by the executioner.
Now, what you please. What death?
Strangling. Here are your executioners.
I forgive them. The apoplexy, catarrh, or cough of the lungs would do as much as they do.
Doth not death fright you?
Who would be afraid on't, knowing to meet such excellent company in the other world?
Yet methinks the manner of your death should much afflict you. This cord should terrify you.
Not a whit. What would it pleasure me to have my throat cut with diamonds, or to be smothered with cassia, or to be shot dead with pearls? I know death hath 10,000 several doors for men to take their exits, and 'tis found they go on such strange geometrical hinges you may open them both ways. Anyway, for heaven's sake, so I were out of your whispering. Anyway, for heaven's sake, so I were out of your whispering. Tell my brothers that I perceive death, now I am well awake. Best gift is they can give, or I can take. I would fain put off my last woman's fault. I'd be not tedious to you.
We are ready.
Dispose my breath how please you. But my body bestow upon my women, will you?
Yes.
Pull, and pull strongly, for your able strength must pull down heaven upon me. Yet stay. Heaven gates are not so highly arched as princes' palaces. They that enter there must go upon their knees. Come, violent death, serve for Mandragora to make me sleep. Go tell my brothers when I am laid out, they then make feed in quiet.
They strangle her.
Where's the waiting woman? Fetch her. Some other strangle the children.
The executioners exit. At least one re-enters with Cariola.
Look you, there sleeps your mistress.
Oh, you are damned perpetually for this. My turn is next. Is it not so ordered?
Yes, and I'm glad you are so well prepared for it.
You are deceived, sir. I am not prepared for it. I will not die. I will first come to my answer and know how I have offended.
Come, dispatch her. You kept her counsel, now you shall keep ours.
I will not die. I must not. I am contracted to a young gentleman.
Here is your wedding ring.
Let me but speak with the Duke. I'll discover treason to his person.
Delays, throttle her.
She bites, she scratches.
If you kill me now, I'm damned. I've not been at confession these 2 years.
When?
I'm quick with child.
Why, then your credit's saved.
Executioners strangle Cariola.
Bear her into the next room. Let these lie still.
Exeunt the executioners with the body of Cariola. Enter Ferdinand.
Is she dead?
She is what you'd have her. But here begins your pity.
Shows the children strangled.
Alas, how have these offended?
The death of young wolves is never to be pitied.
Fix your eye here.
Constantly.
Do you not weep? Other sins only speak. Murder shrieks out. The element of water moistens the earth, but blood flies upwards and bedews the heavens.
Cover her face, mine eyes dazzle. She died young.
I think not so. Her infelicity seems to have years too many.
She and I were twins, and should I die this instant, I had lived her time to a minute.
It seems she was born first. You have bloodily approved the ancient truth that kindred commonly do worse agree than remote strangers.
Let me see her face again. Why didst thou not pity her? What an excellent, honest man mightst thou have been, if thou had borne her to some sanctuary, or bold in a good cause, opposed thyself with thy advanced sword above thy head, between her innocence and my revenge. I bade thee, when I was distracted of my wits, go kill my dearest friend, and thou hast done it. But let me but examine well the cause. What was the meanness of her match to me? Only, I must confess, I had a hope, had she continued widow, to have gained an infinite mass of treasure by her death. And that was the main cause, her marriage, that drew a stream of gall quite through my heart. For thee, as we observe in tragedies, that a good actor many times is cursed for playing a villain's part. I hate thee for it. For my sake, say thou hast done much ill well.
Let me quicken your memory, for I perceive you are falling into ingratitude. I challenge the reward due to my service.
I'll tell thee what I'll give thee.
Do.
I'll give thee a pardon for this murder. Yes, and 'tis the largest bounty I can study to do thee. By what authority did thou execute this bloody sentence?
By yours!
Mine? Was I her judge? Did any ceremonial form of law doom her to not being? Did a complete jury deliver her conviction up in the court? Where shalt thou find this judgment registered? Unless in hell. See, like a bloody fool, Thou'st forfeited thy life, and thou shalt die for it.
The office of justice is perverted quite when one thief hangs another. Who shall dare to reveal this?
Oh, I'll tell thee. The wolf shall find her grave and scrape it up, not to devour the corpse, but to discover the horrid murder.
You, not I, shall quake for it.
Leave me.
I will first receive my pension.
You are a villain?
When your ingratitude is judge, I am so.
Oh, horror! But not the fear of him which binds the devils can prescribe man obedience. Never look upon me more.
Why, fare thee well. Your brother and yourself are worthy men. You have a pair of hearts are hollow graves, rotten and rotting others. And your vengeance, like two chained bullets, still goes arm in arm. You may be brothers, for treason, like the plague, doth take much in a blood. I stand like one that long hath ta'en a sweet and golden dream. I'm angry with myself, now that I wake.
Get thee into some unknown part of the world, that I may never see thee.
Let me know wherefore I should be thus neglected. Sir, I served your tyranny, and rather strove to satisfy yourself than all the world. And though I loathed the evil, yet I loved you that did counsel it, and rather sought to appear a true servant than an honest man.
I'll go hunt the badger by owl light. 'Tis a deed of darkness.
Exit Ferdinand. And let's pause. There's a lot to chew on before the scene is even over. Let's back up, shall we? Okay. The murder of the Duchess and Cariola on stage. Thoughts? Everyone's like in shock here. Lois, this is your favorite, or you want to go first? Or Sarah's got her hand up.
If somebody else wants to speak, let them.
Okay, Sarah.
I just think, let's just all take a moment to marvel at the dramaturgy and Webster, and just what a brilliant playwright, because those two deaths, the choices that he made with them, the one being so calm and resolute, and the other one being how probably 99% of us would behave if we were in that situation, so real and so human and so awful. I just think, it just makes it, just the contrast between those two deaths, these two women, neither of whom have deserved what's their fate. And I just think, he didn't have to do those deaths like that. We've read lots of tragedies, and just to have that contrast between the two isn't something that we come across very often. And I think it's just calculated to have the audience on their knees. I think by the end of it, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, they bring Cariola back on to kill her, and they kill the kids off stage. So yeah, that's definitely something deliberate going on there. And yeah, the contrast is really fascinating and really moving. I mean, they're both really moving in their own way. And some of this language, what good would it be to have my throat cut with diamonds? I mean, that line really sticks with me. And the one she has earlier about the heavens above me are made of molten brass. I'm not really sure what that even means, but what an image. It's amazing. Lois.
Yeah, there's again one bit that there is no stage direction, but I'm sure I know what should happen there when Cariola says that she's engaged, which is one reason why they shouldn't kill her, and the executioner says, "Here's your wedding ring." He holds up the noose that they're going to strangle her with. It's another of these rings that we,
rings and circles.
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah, the 1900 edition, I think, has Cariola actually coming on with the children, and the children are actually shown as being strangled on stage, which would add another layer of grotesquerie to the proceedings. But I think that comes down to director's choice as to whether those are on or off stage.
Yeah, I doubt that you could even do it. I mean, I think they're very young children, and although they are brought on stage in that earlier scene, I think here they're probably dummies, because you couldn't really count on that working with very young children. I think the bodies have to just be brought on as, little sacks or something.
Oh. Yeah, I've got a computer issue here. Yeah, and there's a line. There's a line earlier when she knows she's about to die, and she says, "Give my son some syrup for his cough. Make sure my daughter says." I mean, it's like this tender little domestic moment. In the middle of all this chaos. It's really, really touching. Lois, did you have a response to that?
Well, yeah, because what people often point out is that she's already been shown images of what I think, in fact, you can explain this, but the two dead bodies, I think she's probably only seen wax figures of her husband and the older child who went with him to Milan. But people did sometimes wonder how she could possibly be thinking about her children when she thought they were dead already. But I think it's the two younger ones with her, and that makes sense. But yeah, that is one of the most tear-jerking bits in the play, that she should be thinking at the last moment of, give her the cough syrup and make sure or give him the cough syrup and make sure she says her prayers, after she's been reduced to a state of almost despair. It also shows, I suppose, from the point of view of anybody worrying about whether she has been brought to despair and to a damnable state or not, that she still is, in fact, a Christian.
Yeah. Now that I am awake, two different people say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. Now that I see clearly, now that I'm awake.
Yeah. Because in a sense, he has done what he said he was going to do, bring her by degrees to mortification. And that's why he says he started out as the tomb maker. And I mean, the whole thing, apparently he's really been planning something like this, the process of, and all that stuff, which I think people now think is morbid and usually cut it, about how human beings are basically a dead body, or, they're in the, one of Donne's sermons says, "Does not man die even in his birth?" And that we die every day, we die all the day long. And that it's the kind of thing that was said quite often. I mean, you were supposed to be thinking about the fact that you were going to die. Now we think people who think like that are sick, but that is not what they would have said. Yeah.
Right. The Europeans in the Middle Ages and the early modern period were kind of obsessed with the good death, and a good death meant one where you were spiritually prepared, where you.
Except we now know our cells die daily. Many of our cells die daily.
Yeah. Yes, we are dying all day long. Yeah.
Yeah. Alan, were you waving? Okay.
Can we talk about, if we're done talking about the comparison of the two women's deaths, can we talk about Bosola in this scene?
Let's. Yes.
Because there's a tendency, I think, to start to feel sympathetic towards him, to think that he's somehow changing his black soul. But he finally, changes his mind after he's denied payment. So it sort of undercuts any real sympathy for Bosola, I think.
I have thoughts on that, but let's talk to the person who read Bosola.
I was going to say, to be fair, he's already telling the guy off before he asks for the payment. Like, I'm not saying he's a good guy. I'm just saying, like, it's not like he's like, okay, all done. Like, he has several speeches of like, why? And like, this was bad. Look at what you did. And I did, but like, I didn't do it. You did it. But to me, I think like, from an acting perspective, in terms of like finding the complexity in Bosola, I'm like thinking through, like, would he have gone through with it if the Duchess showed any desire to live? And I feel like that's something to work with in his last little speeches before that, where he's talking about how she's going to die, and he's asking, like, doth not death affright you? This cord should terrify you, and she's saying no. I feel like there's a lot to kind of find in those bits as an actor, to find the complexity of, why he goes through with it and why he, yeah.
This is why I love talking to actors, because I'm not really one myself, and they say things like, and I'm like, oh, I would not have thought of that. Like, would he have relented if she said, please don't kill me? That's I just think that's a great thought. Although, I mean, Rachel has a point. It's just like, well, now pay me because I did it for the money. And what really pisses him off is he doesn't get paid. That doesn't speak well to his character. But if I were directing or acting in this production, and I was invested in making Bosola more sympathetic, I would look at this line where he says, I served your tyranny and rather strove to satisfy yourself than all the world. And though I loathed the evil, yet I loved you that did counsel it, and rather sought to appear a true servant than an honest man. I did this for you. I did this because I wanted to be a loyal servant. I wonder if that's true. I wonder if it's like, I just want someone to approve of me. I just want someone's approval. I just want someone's love. And the money is the way Ferdinand would show him, yes, I approve of you. Yes, I love you. Here's the money. Is it actually approval seeking really more than the money? And the money is just a token of the approval. You did what I wanted you to do. Good boy. That'll do, pig. That'll do. So, I mean, I think you could play that he's in some ways mercenary, but he just wants them to be grateful. It's their ingratitude that really chafes him. I mean, I think you could play that. Lois, were you waiting as well?
I think Mark wanted to say something, and I'd rather get his reaction.
I was just gonna say, I think he says someone to fetch Cariola and some other strangle the children.
Yeah.
On one hand, that can read so cold but I also think, he doesn't say bring the children here and strangle them in front of me. Like, he does not want, like, he's in the minds that he has to give that order, pass along that order from Ferdinand, but like he's almost pawning it off on someone else. He's like, that's something I'm gonna have someone else do.
Well, and sort of doubling Ferdinand, who, like, of course can't do it himself, but he has that sort of stereotype, that cliched line about a servant doesn't always do what his master tells him. When it's wrong, the servant, why did you do what I told? Like, doesn't King John have that? Like, why did you do the wrong thing when you knew it was? Blaming the servant for following orders. Because you should have intervened for me on a moral level. Okay. So yes, Ferdinand's like, the best thing I could do for you is forgive you for what you've done, even though I'm the one who told you to do it. Yeah, this is like really convoluted reasoning. And I did want to talk today a little bit about the claim that they're twins, because I find that a little bit troubling. Rationally speaking, they can't be, really. Ferdinand's a duke in his own right, although there's very little emphasis put on that. But he's a head of state. I'm pretty sure, and that would mean that the cardinal is his younger brother. And if the Duchess has youth and a little beauty, and her brother's a cardinal and younger than she is, it really doesn't make sense chronologically for Ferdinand and the Duchess to be the same age. So do you play that they are? Do you de-emphasize Ferdinand's actual political power, of which he must, even though I might be wrong about the Duke thing, but he clearly has a lot of influence, because he's like, tell my friend the Duke of whatever it is, Ancona or wherever, to banish them or arrest them. He, other heads of state do what he tells them. So he's 20 years old and the cardinal is 19. It just kind of doesn't make sense. So yeah, okay, Lois, I've talked long enough.
Well, I mean, they could all be that age because extremely young people did have a lot of power and did do extraordinary things in this period. It is possible that we have actually got triplets here, because I think at the beginning when Delio asks Antonio twins, he's actually talking about Ferdinand and the cardinal. And then here we get Ferdinand saying that he and the Duchess were twins. I did see one production in which they did their best actually to get three actors who looked as much alike as possible. And they were all standing near each other at the point when that line, twins, was spoken. And it sort of fits with Ferdinand's obsession with his sister, that in a sense, in killing her, he's also killing himself. I mean, I think there is quite a lot of that notion of doubleness here, that you're not just one person, but possibly two. There's also the fact that really, I mean, I wanted to say that earlier about Bosola's behavior, that at the point when he starts asking for his reward, he's also, I think, realized that Ferdinand is beginning to go absolutely bonkers. I mean, and in fact, you can show that line, cover her face, mine eyes dazzle, she died young, is an extraordinary line. I mean, I can still remember actually the guy who taught the course when I was an undergraduate saying that another dramatist would probably have written something like, but stay, I feel a sudden alteration. But, but Webster doesn't. He just, first says, cover her face. He can't bear looking at it. And in fact, there is some stuff about eyes here, I think, because, he can't bear looking at her anymore. And then at the end, he starts talking about going to hunt the badger by owl light, 'tis a deed of darkness. And actually later on, he's going to talk about sore eyes. So it's as if there's something that actually hit him almost looking at her. And then, mine eyes dazzle. And then suddenly realizing she died young, and then realizing, well, she died actually at the same age as he did. I mean, he's obviously going through something really weird here. And I think Bosola's main feeling may just be, I'd better get my money and leave, because this man is clearly not going to be functioning any longer.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just looking at the. Yeah. I suppose they could all be young. It's very hard for me not to think of the brothers as these older, corrupt men, and as her being young and innocent. It'd be a really different effect if they were all 24, because she could have been married quite young, but she's had 3 children, so she was married to Antonio for at least a couple of years. The boy and the girl might again be twins. And there's so much doubling and reflection and circling in this play. So there's definitely something to be said for making that the literal truth that they're twins. Sarah?
Yes, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because I'm kind of with you in terms of that thing of like, there's definitely good reason for playing them as older men, like these really older corrupt men with this younger sister, that that does definitely increase the ick factor. But then I think actually if they are all really young, there's something, I think that could have a real resonance with a modern audience as well, because if you were staging this now in the mid 2020s, we're sort of in an era where there's a lot of online tyranny is created by young guys. I don't wish to generalize, but the incel movement, there's no women in there, and there's not really any old guys in there either. They all have too much sense. It's like it's a young man's pathology. And so I think if you had them, you maybe make the cardinal a few years older, but if you wanted to, but I think if you actually had Ferdinand as quite a young man, I think that would read quite well to a modern audience.
Yeah, I had not thought of that sort of modern parallel, but yeah, that's totally what's going on there. So there's something to think about. What ages are they? Are they a little a little triplet, or is the cardinal slightly on the outside? Alan?
I think the cardinal could plausibly be quite a bit older. Because we're talking about a situation where Aragon and Castile have just taken over this part of Italy. And it could well be that the cardinal had already taken the church path and achieved advancement in that. And then because he had been, and he's also described as an ex-soldier, and in the scene we did, it could well be that he basically disqualified himself from the dukedom by that route. So plausibly he could be the elder brother.
Lois?
Well, it's more likely to have been that he was younger, because normally they did put the younger sons into the church. He could have had a military career, but then been forced into the church, or there could indeed. I mean, I don't know, but these are pretty much historical characters. And actually, I was wrong yesterday when I said something about the Holy Roman Empire invading Italy. What actually happened was that France invaded Italy, the French king, and there's a war going on between France and the Holy Roman Empire, which included Italy at this point, which is why there are so many Spaniards all over the place in Italy. And the references of Milan, which we're going to get to in the last act, there is a siege going on there, and this Lord Silvio, who's an incredibly minor character, was apparently a fairly important general who was, I think, holding it or besieging it or something. It's so the locations even are significant. So I don't really. I'd have to look up the details. Most of the really good editions of the play do have a lot about the historical background and the sort of the material that Webster would have been working from. Including the fact that when this duchess, whose name I think was Giovanna, went into this castle, apparently she was never heard of again. So he's just making up what might have happened to her.
Yeah, it is interesting that she never gets a name. She's just the Duchess of Malfi in this. And so it would have been unusual for the churchman to be older, although I suppose there could have been an older brother who is now deceased. So the middle brother went into the church, and the youngest brother was persona non grata. But because the older brother is already a churchman, I don't know. And our audience in the 21st century isn't necessarily going to be familiar with all of that sort of primogeniture tradition. So yeah, but there's the decision about the ages and how much they're a triplet and how and are they really twins? That's something. Something to think about.
Yeah, we need to get to the end of this.
We got one page left.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fairly well. So we are at exit Ferdinand.
He's much distracted. Off, my painted honor. While with vain hopes our faculties we tire, we seem to sweat in ice and freeze in fire. What would I do, were this to do again? I would not change my peace of conscience for all the wealth of Europe. She stirs. Here's life. Return, fair soul, from darkness, and lead mine out of this sensible hell. She's warm, she breathes. Upon thy pale lips I will melt my heart, to store them with fresh color. Who's there? Some cordial drink. Alas, I dare not call. So pity would destroy pity. Her eye opes, and heaven in it seems to ope that late was shut, to take me up to mercy.
Antonio?
Yes, madam, he is living. The dead bodies you saw were but fainted statues. He's reconciled to your brothers. The Pope hath wrought the atonement.
Mercy.
And she dies.
Ah, she's gone again. There the cords of life broke. Sacred innocence that sweetly sleeps on turtle's feathers, whilst a guilty conscience is a black register wherein is writ all our good deeds and bad, perspective that shows us hell. We cannot be suffered to do good when we have a mind to it. This is manly sorrow. These tears, I am very certain, never grew in my mother's milk. My estate is sunk below the degree of fear. Where were these penitent fountains while she was living? Ugh! They were frozen up. Here is a sight as direful to my soul as is the sword upon a wretch hath slain his father. Come, I'll bear thee hence and execute thy last will. Let's deliver thy body to the reverend dispose of some good women. That's the cruel tyrant shall not deny me. Then I'll post to Milan, where somewhat I will speedily enact worth my dejection.
Exit with body and end of act. Okay.
Yes.
What say you all? Lois, want you to start it on that exchange?
Yes. The difficulty in a modern production, I think, is to avoid a laugh when he says, "Oh, she's gone again," because that really does sound like the wrong sort of comment on it. But it's an extraordinary scene. And again, there is an element of humor in it. I mean, Bosola's line that we cannot be suffered to do good when we have a mind to it. Just for
remember
once,
that
I
one.
felt like doing good, and I wasn't allowed to, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's that kind of someone who's obviously in a terrible state, but can't. He does tend to be humorous, even when he's pretty glum. Also, you notice that he basically is lying to her, of course. I mean, trying to get her back to life by telling her that everything is fine, that nobody's dead, the Pope has wrought an atonement, Antonio and her brothers are getting on just beautifully. This is actually an example, I think, of what, she referred much earlier to the magnanima menzogna, a noble lie. And that's actually a quotation from Tasso's Jerusalem Delivered, in which two people, in fact, both claim to have committed a crime because each one is trying to save the other from death. And Tasso says, "Oh, noble lie, when was the truth so fair?" And the Duchess uses that term about what she's doing, accusing Antonio of embezzlement in order to get him out of there and save his life. But in a way, this might be another example of it, the noble lie, because it's done for a good purpose.
Yeah. We can't be suffered to do good when we have a mind to it. It's like that, that use of the passive voice. It's like the universe is so out of whack that it's not just the brothers that are evil. It's like this whole world that they live in is the Bosch painting. Like there just isn't any way out of it. They're like these little oases of goodness because of the genuine goodness in people's hearts, like Antonio and the Duchess. It's these sort of moments of tenderness and oases of goodness, but it's like the universe is kind of against us in this play. Like everything is conspiring to create human suffering. Other thoughts, Alan?
I'm not sure that at the point when Bosola is talking about the reconcilement, that he is actually deliberately lying, because when you look at the opening of Act 5, that does seem to be on the cards. So it may be that was what he actually did legitimately believe.
At least part of it's true, because the Ferdinand says, "Oh, this is waxworks. I just did that to torture them."
Yeah, that bit is true. Yeah. But the rest of it surely is not. The Pope has had nothing to do with anything. And clearly Ferdinand is not reconciled to Antonio. I mean, the way he's been behaving in this last scene makes it clear he's not reconciled to anybody.
Including himself.
Yeah. But I mean, the other thing that people comment on, of course, is the fact that there's another famous play in which somebody is strangled and says a few words after, and then dies again. And the fact that these two things happened suggests that it must have been believed to be possible, but it isn't possible. I mean, if you're strangled, you're dead, because it's cutting off the blood supply to the brain, and there's no way it's going to, you're going to revive even for a couple of lines. So
it's not like bleeding out where you can lose consciousness, come back for a little bit, and then making that believable for the audience is a little bit of a problem these days. So.
Yeah, but it's incredibly.
I'm sorry, Lois.
I just thought it was incredibly moving. I mean, that the first thing she says is Antonio, still what she's thinking of. I mean, she thinks of her husband and children. And, for that matter, I mean, Antonio, when she first asked him, back several acts in the first act, what he thought of marriage, the first thing he thought of was, if you don't get married, you don't have children. And then he remembers, that bit about the little wanton on riding a cock horse and chattering like a taut starling. I mean, it's it's an unusual play. I mean, very few people talk like that about children.
Yeah. So Mark, I'm gonna tag you next, but let's sort of segue into final thoughts.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, like, I don't think the audience would care or even notice that the unrealism of it, because the way that Bosola talks about it, it feels like it's a miracle. It feels like it's kind of divine intervention, which I think makes it all the more powerful when she dies for real a few lines later. Final thoughts. This is good. I read this a long time ago, but I don't know why I've forgotten so much of it, because it's really good. Really strong. Good play.
Alan, let's do some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, we have suddenly got the body count up, given it's a tragedy. We've had some fairly spectacular effects. The dead hand, the waxwork models, the corpses of the kids. I mean, it's got the horror content up to at least an A-rated film, if not an X-rated yet. That's probably a reference that means nothing to anybody from the other side of the pond.
X still means the same thing, so yeah.
But and it does continue to move without too many spare words, which is nice. Yeah. But what also struck me is the number of quotable quotes in it. I mean, cover a face is certainly a well-used expression. Hunting the badger by owl light, I've come across as a quotation in various places. And usually that, if you get a literary quote from this period, it is usually for he who must not be named.
Or maybe Marlowe, Faithful launched 1,000 ships. But yeah, some of the language in this is eminently
pretty glorious.
Really, is eminently quotable, really wonderful. Yeah. Sarah, thank you.
Yes. I just think it's great. It's not a very analytical approach, but I just think it's great. I'm loving it. I was really sad that I missed the first session, but I was here yesterday, and I'm here today, and I hope I'll be here for the final session as well, depending on when it is, because I just think it's a fantastic play. I love. I was talking earlier about the contrast. This is a play of contrasts for me, and I just love that. There's like the dialogue in one moment is really spare, and then in the next moment it's really rich. There's the contrast between different types of madness, the contrast between different types of death and approaches to death. It just seems to me that Webster is a playwright who knows exactly which buttons to press and is really good at pressing them in a way that doesn't feel, in spite of all the horror, and the things that Alan was talking about, like the dead hands and all the rest of it. In spite of all that, it doesn't strike me as being exploitative or manipulative. I mean, obviously it is manipulative the way all art is manipulative, but it's just, I think it's just because it's handled so deftly, and it's so psychologically authentic. It's so on the money in terms of, you know, how these people react in their various different ways, you know, is totally believable to me, at least. So yay for the Duchess of Malfi. Yeah, looking forward to the final part.
Susan, do you want to do some final thoughts? That you said your camera's wonky, but I still see your tile. Okay, maybe we have essentially lost Susan. Kyle, would you like to share some thoughts?
Sure. I was just totally in agreement with Sarah, and I was thinking about this like through the whole read through this time, and thinking about how baroque the play is, how beautiful, physical, and tragic, like a Caravaggio painting or something is what it reminds me of, or a Donne sermon, as Lois pointed out. And that just, and also one thing that struck me too is what Lynn, you brought this to my attention, and I hadn't seen it before, is that way he's trying to bring her to despair. I had always seen this as such a like clean tragedy, but now it also seems like a morality play in some ways, that like bringing to despair and damnation, but it's like a morality play that's just, you know, become something like a Donne sermon. I mean, it's just fantastic and beautiful, and yeah, I love it.
Yeah, the aesthetic is, I think Baroque is a great word. The aesthetic is Baroque as opposed to Renaissance or early modern. Yeah, okay. And Lois, Duchess of Malfi super fan.
Yes, yes. No, I've always thought it was a wonderful play, and you know, as I said, I would go around reciting it to people and trying to put it on a little stage and everything. And I've seen a few good productions, but never anything that quite got all that there is to be got out of it. And I think that's partly because it is verbally very dense, and you really can't easily convey it in the course of a production, and especially if you're also doing a lot visually. And Webster clearly is thinking in visual terms. I mean, you know, the text needs more stage directions than are in here. There are clearly a lot of implied actions, which, you know, like I'm sure there are one or two editions in which you're told that the executioner shows her a noose when he says, "Here's your wedding ring," but most of them don't. And it's the same with a lot of other action. I think initially they didn't explain that most editions didn't show that bit about your finger can get rid of the devil in this ring, you know, she puts the ring on his finger at that moment, but it doesn't say that either in the original texts. They leave a lot to the imagination. So Webster is clearly visualizing a lot of the action as he writes in the way that a real dramatist could. And it's interesting because as far as I know, he had no stage experience. I mean, he's not one of these people who started as an actor and then started writing plays. But yeah, I think, you know, it's extraordinarily beautiful language. And I think I get annoyed in a lot of productions because they cut very heavily. And I think we have gone through various cycles on this. I mean, Bernard Shaw made this really notorious comment that he called Webster the Tussaud laureate, you know, as in Madame Tussauds, because of the waxworks. And people often focus on things like the dead man's hand and the waxworks and strangling someone on stage as if the whole play were sort of Grand Guignol. And I think the last time they did it at Stratford, there was a really horrible production in which there was this large carcass of a bull on the stage in the fourth act, and Ferdinand stuck his dagger into it and it started bleeding. And gradually the entire stage was covered with blood. And the Duchess, who I think died upstage, eventually rolled her way down to a bed through the blood so that she was covered with it. I was just hoping that whatever she was wearing was waterproof, because the poor actress had to lie there for the rest of the act, you know, either soaked in this stuff or in some kind of a rubber sheeting. Anyway, it was absolutely horrible. I mean, and quite a lot of productions have deliberately dwelt on the, you know, the nasty side of it. And not really given the audience much chance to take in the words. And of course, a modern audience will find a lot of that language very difficult. So it's a temptation to get rid of it and just substitute visual effects. But, you know, and then you just turn Webster into a horror film.
Yeah. Alan, really quickly, and then we'll
just following up on something Lois was talking there. I think you said earlier that this was actually Webster's second play.
Well, he wrote quite a few plays. I mean, we've read, I think at least, we read Westward Ho and Northward Ho. He wrote in collaboration with Dekker. He started out doing collaboration. I think we read Sir Thomas Wyatt too. I think that might have been the first one he was involved in. That had a number of authors, but he was one of them. And then I think his first play on his own was The White Devil, which apparently was not a success, although it's a very effective play. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it at some point, but that's earlier than this. And then there was this, which I think was a success. I mean, it's mentioned in other writings of the period. And I think they even did it in the Restoration early on, which they didn't do with many plays. And it did get adapted at various times. And then he wrote a later play called The Devil's Law Case, which I quite like. It's a tragi-comedy and it's pretty weird. And then he collaborated with Heywood on a play about, was it The Rape of Lucrece? No, it's not. It was it's another Roman history anyway, which I'm blanking on for some reason. And I think he was involved in a couple of other things as well, and some lost plays. He apparently did one about the Duc de Guise, the character that turns up in Marlowe's Massacre at Paris, who was another historical villain. So I imagine he gave him the Ferdinand treatment. But no, he was a fairly experienced playwright by the time he wrote this, and there used to be absolutely nothing known about him, and now someone has done some research, and there's quite a bit, in fact. I mean that he was not some sort of weird outsider at all, but a solid citizen of London and a member of, I think his company, the guild that he belonged to, and his family were involved in coach making. So it's like you could say he's the head of General Motors or something, which doesn't really quite convey it. But he wasn't. So he perfectly sensible man who apparently liked reading history, particularly. He read a lot of French history, Latin, Italian history.
So he'd had quite a bit of experience dealing with actors, which maybe explains why there are few stage directions on the basis if he was working with a company who knew him and he knew them. They would infer the business from it.
Yeah, well, there are very few stage directions in some plays. There are pretty well none. And what's odd with Webster is that he does occasionally stick things in that are quite odd. I mean, they're a different kind from what you'd expect. Or just notes. I mean, presumably that one about the author disclaimeth this ditty to be his. I'm not sure exactly what that one is doing there, but some of the other ones, I mean, the bit about the executioners and the chords and the bell and so on, he wrote. At least I assume he wrote it. I mean, sometimes these were put in by somebody at the Playhouse, but clearly they needed a lot more. I mean, you just have to kind of infer what's going on some of the time.
Yeah, and stage direction. There's a whole stage directions early moment. That's a whole thing. But now I will ask my engineer to have her finger over the stop button. And what remains is to thank all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading of this wonderful play. We'll be back for more shortly. So thank you all very much, and goodbye. I am full of daggers.